your day.
The proverb today, we'd love to get your interpretation. Around a flowering tree, one finds many insects. Around a flowering tree, one finds many insects.
There's hope for something coming out of it. That's my first thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're collating there because something, either they're thinking something or something will definitely come out of it. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. A good one. We're waiting for the good senator. She'll be with us in a minute, and then she can help us understand why come up with this bill in the first place, which then required some regulation in this sector.
Yeah.
But let's look at some definitions in the first place. Where it comes to AI, a lot of people use this technology as a glorified Google. Like maybe you can pinpoint things a little bit more. And it's been long argued that the potential for what this thing can actually do has not actually been achieved or reached by many, many people. Where would you say that the state of artificial intelligence as a technology in Kenya has touched so far?
In Kenya or even in the world, currently with AI, what we are using is said to actually be the least. Like we are just scratching the surface, right? And I think sometime last week or earlier this week, cloud, which is what we are now leaning on more, and like ChatGPT, they put up a report showing their usage across different countries in the world. And it is very interesting that for the global majority countries, so the likes of, Africa, we are using this tool particularly for what they called homework and many programming activities. So the things like building chatbots that are based off of some of these AI, virtual assistants, etc., etc. So we haven't necessarily gone into the trenches of, for example, exploring what is being called strong AI. We are currently doing a lot of the weak or the narrow AI, which is around this general purpose AI and building products or services out of that. So in our ecosystem, and I think this even came out of still that report, majority users are students. So that tells you something.
In Kenya?
In Kenya.
Okay.
And many of the global majority countries. It's the young population that is interested. At least from just a generic place, right? So that should help us think through how we want to approach regulation or how we want to engage or interact with artificial intelligence on the continent, right? So I think it is very important, and I like that your first question is, what does it look like in Kenya? What is AI looking like? How are we using AI? What are we using it for? Who is using it? To inform and create the context under which we will now come and say we are regulating AI.
Because speaking of regulation, there has been, of course, there is a bill, and there has been concerns that it was just copy-pasted from a foreign country.
Okay.
I don't know how factual that is, but it seems the concern was that we are not mindful of our homegrown situation. I think technology has phases of adoption. So, and you rightly put it that we are still in the weak, not the strong version of the AI.
Yeah.
So as we come up with our own, regulation, how do we marry where we are with the international standards? How do we borrow from the best practice with those people who have regulations out there and bills and laws to bring it home, to make it homegrown? Also, not to stifle the utilization of AI, because it seems to be something that we must have. We need to be in tandem with the time. It's an element of balancing development and the laws that we develop for ourselves. How do we seek that equilibrium?
I don't know if I'm going to be jumping the gun by trying to look at this bill that is being presented.
Go for it.
I go for it. Because I think it gives us like a great way to kind of begin to address that question. Is it a copy-paste? I don't think so. It's missing quite a bit. I'm sure people who are saying it's a copy-paste, many of them have leaned on the EU AI Act because of primarily the risk aspect. So what the EU AI Act, one of the things that it's known for is that it categorizes risk when you're using AI systems. So there is what it calls prohibited use of AI. There is the category of high risk. There is the category of, I think, medium and then low risk. We have an element of that in this bill. But a lot more is missing that you find within the EU AI Act. So that is the first thing. So I don't think this is a beautiful copy-paste, which could be a good thing, you know. Maybe we are going away from just picking and, you know. So having said that, and I think just from the initial look of this bill, and Eve mentioned that Lawyers Hub did a really good job of unpacking this bill. They're on YouTube, you can check it out. Some of the strengths that are coming out of this particular bill is, one, it has a very human-centric lens. At least it makes provision for that. In that, from the place of, say, even the workforce, it tries to make sure that whoever is deploying or rolling out AI systems in the workplace actually has some element of assessment. How will this affect my workforce? How can I remedy or mitigate displacement, you know? So that is a good thing that it does. That element of workforce impact assessment actually doesn't feature anywhere else. It is unique to this particular bill, which is a good thing. And then the governance, the introduction of the risk tiers, the element of deepfake criminalization, those are all, even having the advisory committee, those are strengths.
The AI commissioner.
The AI commissioner. The strength there is that it is under a state office, right? So there is an element of independence. But then when you come back and you look at, say, instance, involvement of the president and the cabinet secretary of ICT in some of their roles, you're like, so is it independent, right? The deepfake criminal offense that it highlights is also, in and of itself, can be seen as a good thing, right? But then the questions that are coming out are, is this a reaction to what the three judge bench recently put down some provisions on under the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, particularly on fake information and fake news. So is it just trying to pitch it back in, or is it a genuine or legitimate concern? So I like those aspects of this bill. But then now it leads me to, you know, now comparing and trying to bring in that international lens. And then the gaps. So we've talked about the EU and we've talked about what it looks like. The semblance is in the risk element, some human rights element. But something that we find in the EU Act that we don't find with this bill is that extraterritorial capability. So with the EU Act, it can actually address companies outside of the EU so long as they're using AI systems affecting EU citizens. Our bill does not do that. And this is also a challenge we found even with the Data Protection Act. It's a conversation that we had. And eventually, at least we did have a level of then being able to capture that extraterritoriality. But we're not seeing that here. So what does that mean for big tech?
Okay. Well, perhaps you can ask the mover of the bill because she's here. Nominated Senator Karen Nyamu, good morning.
Good morning, Ndu, and the team here at Spice FM.
How are you doing?
Doing good.
We're glad that you could join us.
I'm glad that I could. How are you doing?
All right.
Karibu Sana. So there are many questions, and of course, we're just going to jump right into it. You missed the wonderful session of having you interpret the proverb, but we can hold you to that later. The AI bill essentially is what it is. This is your bill, essentially, for all intents and purposes. You've come up with this and you've put it before the Senate. What is this, from your perspective, about?
AI is already with us. AI is already affecting our lives, our jobs, and our day-to-day lives, as I said. And we cannot be a consumer of AI without being a regulator of AI. You know, and this bill just proposes to regulate the AI use in Kenya and put forward a legal framework of all things AI in the country. And it also, when I walked in, she was talking about the international aspect. It makes Kenya a lead in AI in Africa because we're the first people to regulate AI. For the first time, we have AI regulator in the office of the AI commissioner, and all these other proposals that protect Kenyans and not block AI, because, you know, I've seen concerns in social media that putting forward this bill is going to limit AI. Far from it, because we are proposing sandboxes where young techs and companies, AI companies, and anyone who proposes to use AI can test it for about 12 months. And I mean, in a safe, regulated area, you know, you can test it and we can observe and have it introduced to the market. So it enhances AI as opposed to blocking it or stifling.
What are some things that you saw that then would require regulation? You know, as is in the market, you see some things maybe having gone on haywire, and you say, okay, because of this, there needs to be regulation. Otherwise, we're going to go off the mark.
Yeah.
What are some of those things, indicators that said, no, guys, this one, we need to do something about that?
Apart from deepfakes, which are all over the place, you know, as a politician, I look at TikTok and the propaganda being run in TikTok about this personality, this other leader. And you know, the 2027 election is going to come out a play, and the campaign is going to be played a lot on social media. And Kenyans are consuming fake information, a lot of fake information, because you can actually fake voice. You can do a speech by the president or by the opposition, an opposition leader. You know, you can fake information, and Kenyans consume this and believe this to be gospel truth. But apart from that, if AI is not regulated, we could see it replacing human jobs. You know, if we don't regulate it, we can see we can find ourselves in a situation where humans are replaced by AI. That's why the bill proposes reskilling. It proposes a new education system right from primary school. It proposes protection of jobs and AI to create even more opportunities for Kenyans.
Senator, I'm just wondering, because if you look at most of the provisions already embedded in the bill, they more or less present a scenario of legalese, like we already have this. Talk about AI commissioner, we already have a data protection commissioner. Talk about human rights, we already have a whole segment. Let me just finish in our constitution. And if you're to look at, for example, accountability issues, we have other laws and policies that support. And just building on to the objects of what you have said, for instance, strengthening the AI environment, must we really have a law to legislate or legalize or, provide measures of engagement? Because as you rightfully said, AI is already here with us. Must it be legalized? Must it be legislated?
As you have said, if you look at the provisions, they're actually filling the gaps of the legislations that you've spoken about. It is filling the gaps that are in the Data Protection Act, the IT laws, because AI was not, when those laws were enacted, nobody foresaw AI and the impact of AI with us that we are having at the moment. So it's a very necessary law. We have to regulate AI. If EU is doing it, don't you think EU already has a data protection law and other laws? So we have to do international best practice as well in this area. And it is for our good, because when we regulate AI, we for the international community and investors, potential investors, it portrays Kenya as a safe country, a safe environment where AI is used safely and regulated, so we are not exposed. And any country that enhances and regulates AI also takes control of its future economy, because AI means more productivity.
And as you walked in, Wakili was already taking us through some of the gaps in the proposed bill. I think one of those was extraterritorial.
And I don't know if you're a co-panelist or you're also an
I am a
interviewer.
guest host.
Oh, you're a
Yes.
guest
Yes.
host? Oh, okay.
That was congratulations. Yeah, so Wakili, what is the space for inclusion? I know these will be subjected to public participation among several other processes, but what is the space for some of those gaps that you already identified? And maybe if you could just repeat 103, 102, so that the mover of the bill can also have a glimpse of the same.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I like that you mentioned the sandboxes, and for me it's a plus that at least we are cognizant of sandboxes, but I thought it was problematic how it is placed within the bill in terms of even its definition and its scope. If we are going to be looking at sandboxes, it makes sense to look it in its best way, so that you are not using it as like a stifling tool, right? Sandboxes are supposed to actually advance, help with innovation, putting out to market. But as it is right now, even capturing the definition of what a regulatory sandbox is not well. So we are not sure, is this going to be a regulatory sandbox? Is it going to be what we call an operational sandbox? Is it going to be a mix of the two? What is it going to cover? It's not really clear. And in practice, like you said, I really like that you mentioned, we have ministries and agencies already doing this. The Communications Authority has an ICT regulatory sandbox, doing really great things, even with AI, right? CMA has a regulatory sandbox which can capture the element of competition and consumer protection. So how about, like, the main question I have about this bill is this the best way to do the things we are trying to do? Are there alternatives that will actually ensure innovation is propelled as opposed to being stifled? Because if we can be able to tap into existing agencies or ministries, AI is not this one item. It is cutting across all the sectors. With SHA, someone really gave a really good example at a forum I was in recently. We have house managers in most of our homes, right? And usually when I'm leaving the house, I will send my house manager 1,000 and be like, Nunua 1, 2, 3 things for supper, for whatever. So this house manager of mine, in a month, depending on our transaction volume, they could be really receiving a lot of money in their M-Pesa. Let's go back to SHA and look at how they tabulate the premiums of what you're going to pay. Financial records could be one of the things that they're looking at, right? At the end of the day, my house manager might be serviced with a higher premium than even, say, me, because it seems as though this person is really having crazy traffic. Those are the specific contexts we need to highlight, and you can't capture all of that in this document. It makes more sense to be like, health ministry, let's unpack AI under the healthcare sector. Let's look at AI under agriculture, etc., etc. You've talked about the foreign companies or organizations. This bill doesn't capture them. And so if we are talking about TikTok, but TikTok is not the one affected by this, this will actually affect the local innovator, the startup in Kenya trying to set up and roll out AI systems. They're the ones who are going to have added bureaucracies. It is not going to be that foreign company who will actually be like, I don't have I don't operate in Kenya. If you look at the EU AI Act, the penalty is currently at 35 million euros or 7% turnover. Ours is 5 million, guys. And this is something we're even struggling with the data protection, because this big tech, 5 million could really be a slap on your wrist, right? If you're operating across the globe, will this deter you? Will you actually feel like, you know what, actually, let me not do that in Kenya because this could actually affect our profits? I don't think it's deterrent enough.
Well, move out the motion. The concerns the Wakili is raising, I think in my imagination, as you develop a bill, you'd have to benchmark on the existing laws. And in your team, the advisory comes in and says, these could be the challenges you may face if you put it this way, so let's amend to present it this way. The concerns the Wakili is raising, did you come across that, and how did you justify bypassing them?
The process of making a law is it involves several stages.
Indeed.
It will go to the committee first, which is a pre-publication scrutiny. Then it goes for publication. It will come for first reading and second reading, where we have debate. There's going to be public participation. You see, as the mover of the motion, I have an idea of what I want to achieve. I want to protect jobs. I want to protect individuals. I want to ensure we enhance AI and maximize it for Kenya in all aspects, in education, in our governance, and other areas where we can benefit from AI. But at the same time, I'm not an AI expert, okay? The drafters of this bill are lawyers at the Senate, because that's what we do. But then at the public participation stage, we will need all this input from experts in this field. And that's why it's called stakeholder engagement as well, because they are the stakeholders, they are the AI users. So we have this proposal, which is to create and have a framework, a legal framework in the country for AI, and create this office of the commissioner and his committee that is multi-sectoral, representing the public sector, the private sector, and some stakeholders from the county government and national government. But we will need you at the public participation stage to enrich the bill. And then it will come again to the committee. We will, in the IT committee, which I happen not to be a member, but I will have to sit in that when we are taking all the public input and all the stakeholder input and enrich the bill to make sure that we encompass the international best practice and any other area that is left out practically, because there are things that are happening in other countries or other parts of the world that we are not yet able to bring on board here. And if you look at the bill, there's a provision that this law will be reviewed after every 3 years. As AI grows, as it affects our lives in different ways, the law will be reviewed every 3 years.
Kenyans may have a problem with the review of the 3 years, because you see there's a sequential implementation of the constitution as well that has not happened. Things we are supposed to do after the sunrise clauses, it has not happened. So they are frowning at the stifling element. And I hear you when you say you're welcoming public participation and experts.
I have a question in that, right? Why not have it at the design phase? And I appreciate public participation, but why not have it at the very first level? And again, I'm speaking as a sandboxer at this point. Sandboxing includes designing with everyone in mind. We have Kiktanet. We have Ambassador Philip Thigo doing some great work on AI. We have a tech policy community in Kenya, you know. And as it stands, even with this initial draft, they have very strong comments or reflections about it. Why not involve them from the very get-go in designing what, because we do have, last year we got the Kenya AI strategy from the Ministry of ICT, right? We are currently having different quarters, the likes of Kiktanet working with GIZ, trying to put together a Kenya AI policy. A good trajectory would be the strategy policy, maybe the bill. That would be the good sequence of events. So why not plug into these communities already working on this and channel out something that, even in its initial skeleton form, really makes sense for the Kenyan person.
Why not?
See, the purpose of this bill is not very much technical, okay? The purpose of the bill, from the onset, AI is just a system that can think, it can make decisions, and sometimes it can be wrong. And when it's wrong, what happens then? Where is the accountability? That's where this bill comes in. We want to make it, we want to have accountability with AI. You know, all these other details that you're talking about at a technical level, we are focusing on the legal aspect. You will bring in the technical aspects that you feel are left out or we feel are necessary, and we will encompass them. Because from the onset, we want to deal with regulation, a legal framework. And if you feel that your area is left out in the framework, then you enrich the bill. But if we decide to pick the examples you have given at the drafting stage, then who do we pick, who do we not pick?
Okay.
But you see, when you open it up at the public participation, every stakeholder, even the one you will overlook, will be included.
So I hear you saying that, I mean, and whereas the technical side of it may be a bit sticky at the moment, but from the point of raising the bill in the first place, how do we divorce that idea from it being a purely political tool to dissuade Kenyans from essentially doing what they want to do on the internet? How do we, from where you sit, say that, actually, guys, this is not because somebody might make an AI video about Karen Nyamu, the senator? Dissuade people from that idea, because it would seem as though what we are doing here is to say, how about we have another tool that's going to stifle the voices of Kenyans?
Exactly.
Because this is the thought that is out there. And that's what I'm saying, Karen. If it's different from that, then that needs to come out. But right now, even from what you said previously, it sounds like, well, let's put something else out there. Whereas Kenya has had a difficult time standing by cyber crime rules, standing by cyber laws. It has been very difficult to put those safeguards and to go by the laws.
Yes.
And here we are adding another one.
That is not even detailed enough.
So how do we say that this is not political, but that it is a necessity?
Yeah.
You keep saying it's not detailed enough, but I think I have explained.
It's not. Like, think about even the prohibited use of
It cannot
AI.
be.
So let's
Just so that we don't
let's
layer
allow
issues
her.
here,
Yeah.
let's
At
have
this
that
stage, it
answer,
cannot
please.
be detailed enough. No, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, that we are putting up an AI bill to deal with political dissent. If you look at the bill and the clauses and the provisions and the sections in this bill, the only part that talks about deepfakes, because when you talk about the political aspect, you bring in the deepfake aspect. It's a very small area in Section 33, I think, where it introduces the fine, the 5 million fine. And that does not apply to politicians only. It can happen to you as a public figure. It can happen to any other woman as a public figure. I have been a victim, and sometimes you're helpless. There are lots and lots of deepfakes on me, and I have learned to, you can look at it, you're mad, and what can you do about it? Not much, because it would be too much effort. So you just learn to get a thick skin.
So can you do something about it with this bill then? Would you be able to do something about it?
Yes.
With this bill?
Yes.
Okay.
You'll be able to go after the person. And because anyone who uses your image or fakes your voice needs to have consent. Okay? And even after you have consent, that content has to indicate that this is AI generated. It is not just politicians who are victims to deepfakes. Any public figure can be a victim of not even necessarily public figures, even your relatives. So looking at it politically is a very simplistic way of looking at it, because the provisions of this act are actually good and progressive provisions. This is a progressive piece of legislation, and it is the political aspect or deepfake aspect is just one very simple.
How can this, and it's important that we don't look at this bill as just the bill, but that within the ecosystem, where previous laws that have been made law, it's so difficult to be able to live by. Should this go first, second, third reading and then be adopted and made law? How do you justify this against, we're not even talking about a different body of law, of legislation. The same character of legislation has not been followed in Kenya. How then do we add another layer of it and say, this one now we will do, still removing the political tinge?
If a law exists, it's up to Kenyans to apply the law or not. You cannot say that after we've passed the law, it's also our responsibility to make sure that you have rights under this law, you have obligations under this law, so it's up to you to follow it. And if you feel your right has been, it is up to you to follow the provisions that protect you and implement them. As for this law, there are other laws, of course, that require the government to implement and all that, immediately this law passes, we are going to have a commissioner of AI appointed, because that will have to follow through. Okay? There is funding for the operations of the IT. There is the framework of what is expected of the commission and its committee. So this is not one of those laws where you say it will be implemented or not. These are one of those that follow through with the timeline of implementation.
So, Senator, if you allow me, I have two questions. One is, at what stage are we with this particular bill? Because that will help to strengthen voices beyond the public participation. Having knowledge of the lawmaking process in Kenya, I don't think that anyone should be blocked out. And I think that progressive voices like the ones that she's mentioning should even be at liberty to write letters, petitions, even at this level, for inclusion. But the second question is, as you address where we are, so that other voices can be able to add on, is that there is part 3 that establishes an advisory committee on AI. And there is 3F, 2 persons being 1 man and 1 woman nominated by the Council of Governors. Why specifically, why did you think that the Council of Governors is a very special pick for the committee?
You know, the role of Senate is to oversight county governments.
Yes.
It is to protect county governments and to advance operations and the interests of county government. And so if a law originates from the Senate, it is more likely and most likely that we are going to make sure that county governments benefit and are involved in what the law proposes to govern. And that's why more often than not, you're going to see provisions of any bill that comes from the Senate mentioning county governments and the COG.
Okay, well, we'll discuss that in my attempt. But at what stage are we?
Careful, there's somebody on camera.
The bill has just been published, and it's going to the National Assembly for concurrence. Then it will come back to us, where the clerk of the Senate is going to publish and invite views in the public participation stage. At this point, it's going to be published in the dailies and on the internet, so that everybody who's a stakeholder, everybody who feels this will affect them, can bring forth their views. And I will encourage you and the people and institutions you've mentioned, bring in their input. We need it, because we want to do a comprehensive law.
Well, Wakili is saying the bill is ill-informed. And
Ill-informed?
Ill-informed, yeah. Like from the saying, there are a lot of aspects that have been left out, that have not been covered. And Kevin is saying, what stage are we in? Do you feel you could withdraw it and have a revise? So that you can onboard,
if stakeholders come in and they're like, we do not want this bill.
Seek expert opinion so that you have aspects covered. What do you think about that?
No. There is no law at this point that can be reached. Okay? Because I've told you, we deal with the legal aspect. Okay? There is no law at the publication stage that is usually complete. It's just
it's a draft.
It's a draft, and it's a skeleton, so to speak, that needs public participation and stakeholder input. So it's not a question, there's no question of withdrawing. It's a question of the public and stakeholders enriching the bill. Because there's no way that the drafters we have in Senate and us guys as legislators, there's no way that we'll come up with a perfect bill that encompasses everything. Because even if I consulted someone when I was drafting or when I was proposing this bill, yes, I consulted people, but they practice a different kind of AI from other stakeholders, and we will need a wholesome bill after the public participation. So the question of withdrawing does not arise.
Senator, what do you believe would be the potential of AI technology in the country today?
What would be the potential?
Or what is the potential? What can it do for Kenya across business, economy, government business?
There's a lot of opportunities in AI. There's in the education sector, right from CBC, we are seeing it being introduced in in an education system. I think MKU, Mount Kenya University, in their Thika campus, have introduced a robot, that is interactive and that is taking education on another level. Instead of education being just theory, there's interactive with the robot and, taking education to another level. There is opportunities, content creators, young people. AI is bringing their craft is taking it to a different level. That you are creating beautiful content because of AI, but at the same time it can be abused, and we have to regulate that. Okay, there is opportunity of being more productive, of course, because the system makes decisions sometimes even faster than humans. And in the aspect of reskilling, that is also provided in the bill, in a instance where we see that AI may replace human jobs, there's a provision for reskilling, and there's also assessment of the impact in the job place. Well, how, if AI is introduced in a job place, what is the effect to human jobs? Then, in that case, it can. The law proposes that you actually create more opportunities as opposed to killing jobs, human jobs. So there's it enhances productivity. As I said, it's going to enhance the economy if channeled properly and if regulated.
Wakili, you want to say something?
Yeah.
As you say that, because I had a follow-up question to you. If you look at the objects of the Act, and based on some of the gaps that you've already highlighted in your analysis, do you think that there is anything that we have left out to strengthen the purpose of this particular proposal?
Yeah. The senator keeps saying that I'm leaning on technical, but I'm really addressing the very issues she's raising. I love that you have mentioned the workplace. I think that is it's definitely a plus. But you've talked about the education bit of it, but we're seeing nothing really about things like curriculum or getting into the nitty-gritties of AI literacy. You've talked about content creators. Nothing comes up about copyright or IP protection. Those are not technical things. Those are legal. So at the very basic framework, this bill doesn't envision that. It envisions the penalty, or rather the stifleness element of saying we must make sure AI does not infringe but it doesn't actually help us build up, innovate, encourage, incentives even. They're not coming up in this initial framework,
yes,
right? And so
there are incentives of the people who increase jobs using AI. There are incentives in the bill. There is also the aspect of, you said it doesn't address?
I've talked about the element of curriculum.
Something else you said that it also addresses. I forget. Something that you've just mentioned.
Well, I think both of you are on the same wave, on a different wavelength, because she's an expert. You're seeking goodwill, and which is okay. We need to regulate. We cannot have any practice in the country going unregulated. But perhaps to reduce the backlash, it may be prudent to have maybe initially involved more expert players in the field, because the space is huge. So. The AI has a lot of, as you say, there's a spectrum of people who do different things there with the AI. But then here we are today. And, we saw there's another bill people were invited to. I think the affordable housing, there were people were invited for public participation. And we saw how it went. That's not what we want, because AI is a good thing. Countries are moving forward. Even as we talk about securing jobs and reskilling, people are going to electric vehicles that are robot-driven, So definitely there'll be a human impact. But to find that balance, you have good intention, they have the expertise. How do we find the balance now? Because the public participation, Kenyans don't have faith in that process.
No, you see, there's some public participation that is political, but this one has nothing to do with politics. It is a well-intended bill. It comes from a good place, a lot of goodwill. So if both the legislature and the stakeholders agree on a common ground, we can have a good bill that will make her happy.
This is for your happiness. Or
It's for the Kenyan people. I would think it's for the Kenyan people.
Yeah, the Kenyan people includes, you are speaking for Kenyan people today, right? Yeah, so when I say you happy, it means all these things you're raising.
Would you be keen to have a caucus with experts as you go for the second and the third, reading?
Definitely. And don't forget also, when the bill goes for debate in the House, there's all this input from members.
Who are not experts.
Yeah, who are not experts.
Largely, they are not experts.
Yeah, that is true. But they're debating after expert input.
Okay, it's a tight-rope walk because
but
you sought expert opinion, and this is what you produced.
It applies across
at the best. Yes,
it's not just about this bill. It applies across any bill you see churned out in our parliament, in the Senate and in the National Assembly.
Does it take into consideration when these experts come on board the atmosphere? And I'm pulling on this from something that I keep referencing it, that the Supreme Court Judge Isaac Lenaola said when they make their judgments. And they said, we take into consideration what happens around us by the time we are making a judgment, because it cannot just be the books and my singular interpretation of something. So does it also happen?
I'm a lawyer. That is called judicial notice.
Oh, fantastic. All right.
Lawyer as well?
So when this is happening, when experts sit around the table or wherever it is, they sit around to come up with something like this, do they take into consideration the why of why they're doing this? Or is it, well, we've been asked to come up with a bill. Exactly. Let's do it. Do they take into consideration Karen Nyamu or whomever else may have asked them to put this together? Or are they just doing a job? I'm sure you know why I'm asking.
Yeah, well, even if they don't, you see, the final say comes with the people's representatives.
However, when your output is a cake, the things that you put into the cake will determine, the things that you put into the bowl will determine what kind of cake you put in.
Yeah.
So if you put in eggs and carrots, you're going to have a carrot cake. You put in cucumber and garlic, you're probably not going to get a tiramisu, right? If somebody has been told, this is the outcome that we are trying to achieve, what are the chances then that me as an expert or anybody else as an expert sitting down to charge it is influenced by the one who asked me to put it together? What are the chances?
Well, I want to say that it doesn't really matter at that stage, because when it comes to the House, the people who debate on it are people's representative. You've said they're not experts. So what they're interested in is the letter and spirit of the provisions of this law and how it affects the people on the ground. They may not know the technicalities and all that, but they know that our people will be affected in one way or another by this, and we cannot allow this. So if an expert puts in some input that can have grave consequences on the ground, we are the people's watchdogs in the Senate, in the National Assembly, because it will also go to the National Assembly. And there are things that will not go past us, especially if they affect the common mwananchi negatively.
So ultimately, we'll have regulations for this bill, right? And part of what I think that experts like RISPA is asking for is that inclusion aspect of it. But what is the space for engagement beyond public participation? I'm saying this because in some of the processes that we have seen like this, Senator, progressive processes like this have ended up being petitioned in courts of law. We've had people going there and stopping processes. For this goodwill, how much buy-in is open for experts, even beyond public participation, before and during public participation?
Well, I think the only window for goodwill buy-in is at the public participation. And after the input, I'm going to repeat myself, because the question you're asking, I think I had already addressed. After all this input, the Committee of IT sits down and goes through it and factors it in the law with all the good intentions, without wanting to lock anyone out, without having ulterior motives. And so I don't think there's more goodwill.
So, for
than that.
example, if RISPA and her caucus and the caucus of a community of practice on data protection, I think it's called Society something,
Yeah.
Internet Society of Kenya, they put up a breakfast meeting and invite the mover of the motion. You think that's something you can be able to do?
Yes, yes.
If other people who are maybe investors invite the mover of the motion and the team from Senate for a lunch meeting or just a session to break down the bill, is something that you
it's
can
something
do?
I can do, but it will still end up